And hello, welcome back to the show. I hope you have all had a wonderful couple of weeks. Darren, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. It's been an exciting time with a lot of neat releases as of late, which it's been good watching new stuff. So I'm having a good time with all these August releases. August is a good time of year for new things coming out. It's been fun.
I must confess, I have not gotten anything brand new. I'm still I don't know if I brought this up, but I'm really hooked on these films by a French actor named Jean-Paul Belmondo. And I'm trying to see everything I can from his 70s stuff and a bit of an early 80s. So that's where I'm at right now.
That's got to be quite the thing to dive into. It's a unique choice. I like this actor. Let's go.
It is. I've described him as the 70s French equivalent to Tom Cruise. He did his own stunts. He would do crazy things on camera. Now, we're not talking like Jackie Chan insane levels, but this was even before Jackie Chan was a thing. So it's just kind of interesting, and he's got a lot of charm and charisma, and his films are very strange. So I've been kind of having fun with that.
He's doing his own stunts and everything else. Like before, it was a cool thing to do your own stunts, or he had to do his own stunts because no one else was there to do his stunts
That's
for him.
a great question that I have no answer for as of yet. I am still learning about this guy, but they're starting to release his films. Kino Lorber has that great archive collection, and that's where I'm getting most of mine from. I had to buy one from another, I think it was Sony, but it's an older release. But it's a really fun little movie called The Burglars, and it's very strange because it starts off very slow, but it builds and builds and builds, and it's just a lot of fun and very weird.
Fantastic.
Well, it's French. Great time watching these.
French is weird sometimes, so yeah.
It is. It is. They look a lot like Italian films, but better.
Okay.
They're better made, and they're just, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I could see where somebody be very confused and think, oh, this could turn into a giallo in any second.
Oh, man, it's like this seems Italian, but they're speaking French.
So anyway, you and I were having a conversation about what to do for an episode. We have this every so often, and you brought up a great idea about 80s, movies about kids in the 80s. Specifically certain kinds of movies where kids got together and they went on adventures, they faced danger. And this was going to be the topic, and it still is. However, I was watching an interview with actor Billy Mumy, who, for those that don't know, he played Will Robinson on the original Lost in Space. And he did other things, but he's still the most, I think, if you ask the majority of people, if they knew that name, they would know him as Will Robinson from Lost in Space. And it was an interesting interview. He brought up something that I didn't think was a problem back when that show came out. But it turns out it was a problem they had back on that show that would later become something I would hear a lot about. And basically, when Lost in Space was first made, it was black and white, so it wasn't in color. And it was a lot more serious. So this is the 60s, by the way. And the original run of Lost in Space was one of my personal favorites. I want to make a note on that too. I loved it when it was a darker, more frightening adventure show. And I didn't grow up with it as far as I wasn't alive in 65. But I saw it in syndication later. And it turns out that when the show was first being aired and these black and white, darker episodes were playing, I don't know if it was the studio or the network, I think it was the network, started getting letters from parents saying, hey, this is a cool show, but you're scaring the crap out of our kids. Could you lighten it up? And that's what they ended up doing. And if anybody here, I don't know, Darren, did you watch Lost in Space?
I've watched some episodes over the years. I don't know, I wouldn't call myself like I've watched every single one. I appreciate it for its historical importance in the whole zeitgeist of science fiction. However, in a lot of ways, I feel like it was in that world and time era of with Doctor Who of that level of, I don't want to call it cheesier, but definitely stuff I saw was post the era you were excited about, where it was definitely darker and more serious. So it's different.
So you did see it.
I did not see the darker stuff that you're talking about. No, not directly.
Okay.
But the lighter heart, more silly later version of it, I definitely saw. So
that's what I think most people think of when they think of Lost in Space. They think of, first of all, it was in color, and they think of Dr. Smith. We're doomed. So I think that's the image. But if you watch the original season, and I'm not saying it wasn't still cheesy, but it was a lot more serious. And it's interesting to me that back then they were still doing this, won't someone please think of the children? And this was something that when I was growing up in the 80s almost became like a curse, because one of my favorite cartoons growing up was Thundar the Barbarian. Now, did you ever see that?
I've watched episodes, definitely in the past. I have not watched all of it.
So I loved Thunder the Barbarian. It was my number one favorite cartoon. Far better than He-Man, far better than Black Star, if anybody remembers that one. It was just a great show, a great adventure show. It was like Conan the Barbarian, but set in the future. A land of super science and sorcery, as the opening would always inform us. And guess what? It only lasted a season. Want to know why? Parental groups. Once again, some group had been writing into the network and complaining about how violent it was. And it's really funny if you see the show. The opening to the show is kind of preposterously violent as you watch the destruction of the world from a meteorite that passes by very fast, and it causes a cataclysm around the world. And the story picks up 2,000 years later. Now you have like barbaric societies. You have some remnants. It's a little weird because there's people wearing like remnants of like our period clothing. It's 2,000 years. There wouldn't be anything left, right? But it was still a fun adventure. And yeah, it got dark, but there was always a great message. There was episodes about lying and being noble, standing by people, even, when they're at their lowest point. Usual kid stuff, right? But these groups were writing in, and they got the show taken off, and it got replaced by I looked this up. It was either Laverne and Shirley Go Into the Army, the animated series, or it was a Mork and Mindy animated series. And there's two conflicting stories, but got taken off the air because it was just too violent for kids. Found out later, this so-called group, it was only like 5-6 people.
Seems about par of the course where they jump in and they like stop things from being, and they like only a couple people are being very vocal about it. That too, also, I saw Thunder almost exclusively due to Boomerang through Cartoon Network's sister station. So that's like, they definitely replayed it over the years and still probably, do if Boomerang's still around. I don't know. But that's how I came across it historically, is from Boomerang, which plays like all the old good stuff.
I don't know Boomerang at all. I know it's on DVD and Blu-ray now, but essentially, again, there's that story, and that reminded me of even like Married with Children, and there was complaints, and it was just this one lady, and she was complaining about the one episode called Her Cup Runneth Over. And so it always is like these small, tiny groups complaining on these large, shows that are loved. Thunder the Barbarian had great ratings. This wasn't like obscure at the time. It was doing very well, and it was taken off the air because it was quote unquote too violent. And I guess that ties in a little bit the movies we're going to talk about. But let me ask you right off the bat, when you were a kid, because I believe kids face our fears, and we face our fears through movies and TV shows, and we generally like the spookier ones. What was that first movie that you remember where like it did scare you, but you kind of loved it?
Yeah, that movie is absolutely the one and only Maximum Overdrive. Definitely saw that too young. I think I saw it about 4.5, maybe not even 5. Randomly was on TV at a resort in, I believe it was Florida somewhere, and we had this situation where I was in the hotel room and my parents were down playing bingo. It was a weird situation. Like there was like clowns. It's bizarre, but there's a lot of things were weird going on with that. But the experience of watching it, being in like a resort location in the hotel, and like watching that, and the clown face, the gremlin, whatever you want to call it, Joker character, scared the crap.
It was the Green Goblin.
The Green Goblin.
It was on a semi-truck transporting toys.
Yep, and that just got me. Scared the crap out of me. Even in, the rooms got, the lights are on, everything, like it's a well-lit, like hotel resort, whatever was going on. So I remember that very vividly. And then running down to like the bingo thing, and there being a clown hosting the bingo, which is very weird. Not that I have a problem with clowns, but it was like, I remember the weird oddity of the whole situation. It was just bizarre. And yeah, Maximum Overdrive definitely was, before, I saw it before I should have. I didn't even see the whole thing. It's like, oh, this is scary, this is cool. Then it's like, oh no, this is scary. It's one of those moments when you're young, a lot of horror elements in a movie can be like, this is really neat. And then it's like, this is chocolate. Nope, this is sriracha. It gets you, in that kind of way. So it got me.
How old were you?
About 4.5, maybe 5.
Oh, okay. So you were really super young.
Yeah. At that age where you don't know everything, but something like that will get your attention. Like there's vehicles and things going on, and all of a sudden you realize it's scary. So it's like a huge juxtaposition from like where you're at initially watching something and seeing something. I didn't like start from the beginning or anything like that. It was like in the middle of the movie I switched channels or whatever it was on. It's like, oh,
you walked in on it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, more or less. So that was a unique situation for me. Do you have a vivid memory that's as weird as mine in regards experience to a movie.
I'm laughing because I'm just thinking of you having an unnatural fear of semi-trucks from that
No,
point on.
I'm okay. I'm safe for. I'm not afraid of semi trucks. Everyone, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, mine was one I don't know exactly the year I saw it. I think I saw it the year after it came out because it was a drive-in theater, and the movie is Jaws, which was 75, but I'm almost sure I didn't see that. I would have been 5. I think I saw it when I was 6. And back then, movies circulated around the country a lot more and they stuck around a lot more. And drive-ins tended to have a lot of second run. So I believe I saw it in 76, but I can't say for sure. But that movie scared me to death. And it didn't help that after we saw Jaws, we went on vacation to Florida. And my brother swam under the water, grabbed my legs and pulled me under. And this is in the same week that I'd seen Jaws. And my parents told me I would not swim in a lake or ocean for years after that. It was pools only. They could not get me to go into a lake or ocean because of that.
The shark still looks fake, and they still got you good. So, oh well.
No. We're not talking about the Back to the Future thing.
So I think that Jaws is one of those movies that if you saw it at a young age, I couldn't even imagine what that would be like when you have no other frame of reference in that situation, let alone regardless of your perspective of knowing about other things where you're at generationally, but just the quality of that film is so good. I think the impact, if you were the same age at that point today in today's world and you had the same knowledge base, the movie's gonna have the same guttural effect on you no matter what. And that says a lot. Your experience there is someone could have that same experience today and feel the same thing today from watching that movie. So that's cool.
I don't know. I mean, it's a different kind of thing. It's like kids that grew up with the Phantom Menace now are grown up and they're saying, hey, we like it. Back when that came out, look how much everybody hated it. So who can say a movie from 1975 today, because this culture grew up having that movie already there.
That is a very cool thing to have, because a lot of people today who didn't get to have that experience at that age, I personally think are missing out. And I didn't get to have that experience like you did. And I think that's a cool experience. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
That's kind of to what's going on. I mean, if you look, everything is so divided. There, a PG is generally a very soft PG, and an R is a very hard R. So the kids are not seeing the hard R's, at least not in the theater. They're seeing them on streaming in their friend's house, and we know that. But they're not getting the kind of experiences we had because they are missing those, what used to be called gateway horror films. I don't even know if that's a term anymore, but they were smaller movies. And what I mean is they weren't your Halloween, Hellraiser, but they had scarier themes to them. And a movie in the 70s, it's funny, we talk about how the 80s anything went, but the 70s, man, they just didn't care. Those movies were very raw. If you look at Jaws for 1975, it's got brief nudity and graphic violence. And I mean, it is a genuinely scary movie. So that was a PG. Would it be a PG?
No.
I don't think it could achieve a PG-13 now, to be honest.
No, I agree with you. I think that's the difference of what you have. But if a child did get to see it, because nowadays they wouldn't get to see it anymore. That's, I think, is what's is disappointing. To your note about what is normal today, right? Is what Adam Sandler's Transylvania, the animated cartoon, is the gateway drug now to horror films or whatever, and that's a comedy slapstick thing.
Don't know, because cartoons, again, look at our cartoons. Watership Down. Everybody keeps saying how traumatic that movie is and how it traumatized the children. Nobody was traumatized when I was growing up. Nobody saw Watership Down and ended up in therapy. Not one person. And Secret of Nim is a very dark animated film, and once again, nobody ended up traumatized. So I kind of resent that when I hear these reviewers today say, oh, these movies traumatized kids. No, they didn't. We watched Salem's Lot on TV, for crying out loud. In 1979, that was a miniseries, and it had a scene that scared the living daylights out of every kid I grew up with, including myself, where this one they're out by this old, I think it's a mortuary. It's been a long time since I've seen it. And one of them gets captured and killed by one of the vampires. And then later he comes floating to his friend's window, and he's scraping on the window of his friend, floating outside of it and going, let me in. Were we scared? Yes. Were we traumatized? No. So I I don't know if you could transpose what we used to have versus now. But then again, I hear kids today talking about R-rated movies more so than I did when I was growing up.
Well, I think back to that point that you just made is that today it's harder to get access to it, but yet they're getting access to it in some cases anyway. But I don't think the parents are understanding the differences, and maybe today's the reality of the fact that so much stuff is now. This is a bit off topic, but the reality of today's stuff is so much more fake, not real. A lot of the graphic elements and things that were you would call in quotes traumatizing or difficult was because it was all very real, and you were at that point in cinema where things looked really good on camera. It was no longer very fake, but it was also very real. Like nothing on in front of the camera was fake. It wasn't like they did CGI or had fake blood or this or that the other replaced something. It was all very real. So, and maybe film helped with that too, for all the effects, and helped give a glaze over things to make it even more impactful. But I think a lot of the things that they define as R today really would have been PG-13 or PG back then, which is kind of a weird, or not even that, because it was almost cartoonish. Maybe it would have been laughed at.
Well, it depends. Lost Boys is R-rated, and many have debated that that's not a very R-rated movie. There's no nudity. There's very little swearing in it. So it's just a couple of scenes of blood, and that was at that time period. It was a little later in the 80s, but it was still around that time period when things were harsh, and it got an R rating. So I don't know, maybe in the 70s you could say, oh, it'll probably got a PG. But horror always had that stigma, right? Like critics and the MPAA, you put horror as a label on something, they were always a little harsher. So I think that depends. Like Jaws was kind of respected. It's weird to say that, but it was, because it wasn't billed as a horror movie. So I don't know. I'm not sure how you would transpose those two.
Maybe it just depends upon the marketing and the content, because the content of Jaws is more of a practical situation that's not sensationalized, not a fantasy almost, even though it definitely is. Whereas something like The Lost Boys gets defined as more of a fantasy, so it gets treated differently.
Well, yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. What brought about the PG-13 in the first place was movies like Romancing the Stone, Gremlins, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Those were the three films cited for the creation of PG-13. Now, of the three, I think Romancing the Stone kind of stands out a little bit because it's not genre, it's an adventure film, but the film has a guy who gets his hand bitten off by a gator, and I mean, you see it. You know what I mean? It rips his hand off and he's got a bloody stump shooting blood. It's also very vulgar. There's a lot of gunplay in it. It's a pretty hard PG. And so that was one film cited, but then you jump over to Gremlins and it's not that bad, but you see a gremlin blow up in a microwave and the old lady being shot out the window on the stair ascender. Do you remember that sequence?
Yes, I remember this sequence.
My mom was a monster like I became. And when we watched it, she laughed so hard when that lady got shot out the window like a cannonball. She couldn't stop laughing. So there you go, people. You got an idea of my household.
That's what you needed, though. I think that's where it became this weird odyssey where people wanted to trade off like the comedic and serious, and didn't have the right balance to understand that this was not a serious moment and it was meant to have comedic value, yet it was intense from at its face value, but it's not how the audience reacted to it. And I think the critics or the MPAA or whoever's wanting to challenge what rating should be what didn't understand the context in which it was most likely to be experienced. I mean, if you were in an audience seeing with like 100 other people, 200 people in a theater, they would have had the same reaction. You probably would have laughed even louder because of it, right? But because someone was one-off reviewing it and looking at the context of it, you're like, this is not okay. The children, it's like, or you can't have them watching that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that leads right into the movies. We started this whole conversation about when we first started discussing the episode, these adventure movies that are so mimicked today. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that Stranger Things was modeled after films like Goonies, elements of E.T. There was a TV show called Erie, Indiana. I don't know if you remember Erie, Indiana.
Very
I think
much
a lot
so.
of people have forgotten it.
It's a great show. Everyone should go watch that show. So.
Yeah, it was like a precursor to things like Goosebumps and stuff like that. And that kind of kids facing danger, going on grand adventures, that was very, I almost said it was normal for us, going and staying out all day. It's true. I see a lot of memes on Twitter where it's just like, did you guys really stay out all night and your parents didn't care where you were? And I mean, they cared, but yeah, we did. We rode our bikes or we walked all around town. we did crazy things, man. We climbed. I think I climbed every major building in the city in the town I grew up in, and jumped off a dam, went swimming, and I mean, it was the kind of stuff we did. And I think these movies merely reflected the way we were. And so I guess, what's the first one you want to bring up? I'm going to let you lead on that. What would you like to
Well,
first?
I think the biggest one that I would like to lead off with or discuss probably is going to be the ones that had the most impact to start with, the ones that were most well remembered by most people. I think one of them is going to be E.T. from the grand
Oh,
scheme of
E.T.
things. So leading up with E.T., there's other ones we can talk about, but we can probably bookend.
I didn't think
with,
you wanted to talk about it.
I do want to bring up E.T. initially only because it builds in this whole bigger scope of things, and considering we were just chatting about Jaws, it fits in line because it's one of those things where it's almost like a reversal, where you have a group of kids very similar to what Jaws is, but now you're dealing with a different scenario with a friendly alien, effectively, but you're dealing with the difficulties of society and the government and wanting to do XYZ to your friend, and you have this whole process to deal with that, and children have to deal with these big, bold adventure elements there very suddenly, and it's not like it's explicitly violent or difficult in that regards, but there's a lot of family elements tied into it, right? And a lot of growing that and fixing those problems, as well as the ET being part of the whole process and helping bring the family together, and then challenge and support his return back to where he went. I mean, there's a lot to that. Granted, the kids are not actually at risk from like the in quote unquote threat, aka ET. They're actually at more risk from local society, and in a lot of cases I think we see in general that the local society fails with a lot of the children. The children are seeing things the adults don't see or can't see, and don't have the wherewithal to do something. I think E.T. is a great example of that in a more, let's just put it this way, less visceral kind of manner. It's very obvious that they're overcoming the weaknesses of the parents and the adults around the area to make the right choice and do the right things. And I think that's just a highlight of how it's done. And I'm not saying other films that we'll talk about obviously didn't do it well or couldn't do it well, or maybe don't deserve more credit because they were before or after, etc., depending on how they handled it. But this one does a good job at just simply making it to where the average person can understand what we're trying to say about what makes a good film that supports children and is good for children, and the idea that just because one is more violent or less violent or more sensational in some ways doesn't change that importance that it can have to a young adult or a kid for that matter.
I guess I have to ask, in what manner are you talking about this? I don't know where you're going with the social part of it.
The social element of it, as far as like the society, people thinking about like a movie having a more or less positive impact on a child, right, or being dangerous for their consumption. I don't.
But were
think...
people calling E.T. dangerous? I don't
Oh
remember
no,
that
I'm
happening.
no. I'm saying that E.T. is a good example of where people will agree is a good thing, but there's other ones where they have issues with them, but fundamentally the underlying message or tone is no different. It's just that the context and the circumstances around the story that's being told are different, which we could segue to other films that definitely do land in that square where they are different and are not ones that people would have thought of as being good. For example, Monster Squad, which we could go to, right? Very different underlying tones, different violence, graphicness, elements, but the overarching nature of the narrative is still very similar between the two, in that the children see things and can do things that the adults cannot.
Well, that's thematically what they're definitely doing. I mean, before we get to Monster Squad, I'd like to go back actually,
Yeah.
because we have films like Goonies and we have Explorers, and you were saying like Explorers was one that you really loved. And I have to say that when like Goonies came out, I can't lie, I wasn't really a big fan of Goonies at that time. I grew up and liked it better as an adult, strangely. But when I was a kid, I think I was spoiled, I'll be honest with you, because I really loved Raiders of the Lost Ark and I loved all those other movies coming out. And I think that Goonies just got a collective meh for me at the time. I'm still not madly in love with it, if I'm honest, but I got to watch it with my nephew's kids, and the reaction to Goonies was perfect. Like, it was exactly what you would want from kids. I don't care what era. They were so into it, and the idea of pirates and there being like a giant skeleton organ, that you play the right notes or rocks fall away. They loved it, and they didn't care that, honestly, they didn't even acknowledge the concept of child endangerment, because in their imaginations, they were the kids. They were at that perfect age, which was like 6 and 7, and they were just along for for that ride, and they like were literally like jumping all over the place. They would like, I don't mean jumping during it, but like they'd be on the floor and then stuff would happen, and now they're up on the couch with me. But then something else would happen. They were down on the floor, on their stomachs, staring at the screen, getting closer to the TV. They were into it. Their body language even said, hey, I want to go on an adventure. And that's exactly kind of the way I think of like when I was a kid, when I was really young, because now I was a teenager. So if I had seen Goonies, like say at their age, what's Goonies? That's 85, right?
85.
Yeah, it's 85. So I was 15 at this point. So that's very different. You're very different at 6 and 7 than you would be at 15. And so that's why I've always said that when I saw Monster Squad, that was more me. I used to call Monster Squad my Goonies. And I find it interesting. You brought up about E.T. being socially acceptable for kids, and yet like Goonies was socially acceptable. But when Monster Squad hit, there was a pushback against that film. There was a big pushback. I mean, there were things in Goonies, like in Goonies, I think the biggest complaints I heard was about the swearing. The Corey Feldman jokes that are early on, like he's freaking out the maid in Spanish.
Yeah, I mean the earlier stuff in there was, and I think that you see some of that come through in Monster Squad too as well. But there's some stuff that's definitively not okay anymore, or a little bit insensitive or inappropriate per se in today's world, which almost seems worse than the actual content of the movie and how violent and scary the movie is. It's an interesting change in how things have happened over the course of the years. Like people would have a bigger problem with that kind of what's being spoken than the fact there's like a dead body hanging in a freezer or something like that, right? They're more bothered by the verbiage that are being used or the words that are being spoken.
No, not at that time. I'll disagree with you there. They were not happy about the body in the freezer. I mean, I'm going to go against you on that one. I would say they'd have a big problem with that. But it was weird how, like, E.T. has some genuinely scary moments. There is some freaky imagery in that. Like, when the kids go to find E.T., he's turned up missing. And then I'll never forget, like, they find his body in a sewer. And he's all scaly and white. And I still, to this day, remember, like, kids around me starting to cry when they found E.T. in the sewer. And it's like, that stuff scared the crap out of kids. Elliot and E.T. are dying. And
there's an emotional connection there. Emotions.
Yeah.
It's like very strong. You become attached to E.T. It's like your friend, your pal. I don't want to unrelate it to like other things in life that a kid can relate to, but like a pet, more or less. Not to make E.T. sound like a pet, but the reality is like at that young of age, when you see like a pet suffering or hurting, a kid's very easy to understand and relate to that kind of emotional connection. And E.T. didn't really have much more depth than kind of that kind of relationship. But the reality was, if you saw him as a kid hurting and E.T.'s been like this friend to you and just there, it's like that's a scary thing for a kid to go through because they're not used to that kind of sudden change like that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. We connected. I told you about the kids watching Goonies. They were physically so invested. Like, I guess you could call it a form of anxiety, but it was on the positive side. They were along for the adventure in their heads, and they weren't getting in trouble. They weren't like, jumping on the furniture or anything like that. They were just like restless, right? Because they'd be on the couch, on the floor, and because they were invested with these kids. They were on the adventure. And the same thing is with E.T. They invested in Elliot and E.T. and, it gets dark, but then it lightens up again and they go riding their bikes on a grand adventure, getting away from the FBI. What every kid dreams of, racing the FBI. But
yeah, but that's the part that also makes the kid the most excited. They can envision themselves in that position, saying, "Hey, I can also do, I don't know, great. I can do things in which are beyond the expectations, and I can envision like what I could be capable of doing. I can relate to that scenario, envisioning myself doing the same thing that they're going through right now. I would do the same thing and think that I could do it." I think that's inspirational to a child, even though questionable from a lot of different reasons to inspire that into a kid. But the reality is they think that they can do that, and they see themselves in that child on screen, and that's what inspires them to like get so enthused behind it, which I think is true for E.T., it's true for Goonies. Regardless of the detail, you can start getting behind that situation where you can the kid can relate to that, even though they don't have enough life experience perhaps yet to fully understand what that means yet. They still can see themselves in that person on screen.
Well, they lack the understanding of consequence.
Yes.
that's what they lack the understanding of. And I mean, as an adult watching E.T., you are looking at things a little differently than you did as a child. I think that's every movie. I can't remember how many people said, like, you look at Ferris Bueller and you're on Ferris' side when you're a kid, but then as you get older, you side with the principal more. You kind of understand. It's like, wait a minute, these kids are run shot across the city, driving a car they shouldn't be driving, you know, and skipping school, and what's the principal's name? Rooney is portrayed as the villain, you know, and it's the old joke about Walter Peck is the villain in Ghostbusters when you're a kid, but as an adult, you're going, wait, no, he was right. So you don't understand the concept of consequences as a kid. So I think that juxtaposition, which is why you have the scene with the shotguns, right? The FBI, you know, steps out of the car and they rack the shotgun. And I never felt like they were really going to shoot the kids.
No, I don't think they knew what they were doing. They just were doing what they were trained to do.
Trained to do. Yeah. I never looked at it. And I know they digitally removed the shotguns later because of Columbine. And I'm like, did an FBI agent go in to Columbine and shoot it up? You know, it's like, come on, that's stupid.
They put them back. So
I know they put them back, but it's a great example of that overreaction. Like, I saw those movies as a kid, and none of us went and shot up anything. You know what I mean? That was much later anyway. And E.T. wasn't even connected with that shooting at all. And yet, you had people trying to force that connection. Just because you saw a shotgun in this movie, you're going to connect it to this horrific event. And it's like, that's illogical. And there's a lot of people, they genuinely think that way, and it's really weird. And like when Monster Squad came out, which again I loved, and it's a dark movie, it earns its PG-13, okay? It definitely earns its PG-13, but there was a lot of people upset by that movie, and they would not take their kids to it. But every kid I knew that saw it loved it, every single one of them. So unless you're taking 5-year-olds to see it, I don't see the issue. I just don't.
I don't know. I would take a 5-year-old to it, I guess. But I don't. To me, it's only because.
I hope your own, because you're not saying you'd grab some 5-year-old and take him to a movie.
No, no. I mean, if I was entrusted to take a 5-year-old to it, I'll use that. Like, here, you go take my 5-year-old to go watch this movie. I don't want to be blamed for it. Okay.
Hey, Billy, enjoy the film. Next up, Stephen King.
Yeah. Well, then we'll watch it. We'll watch Maximum Overdrive next, right? There we go. Yeah. But no, I think
hang out at a truck stop afterwards.
Yeah, no, not that. It's horrible. But we'll go. But Monster Squad in general, I think it's funny because people have such an issue with it. But it's all the classic monsters, effectively the Universal monsters, even though whatever they're doing with that. But like effectively the classic monsters redone in a new way. Its intent is to bring it to a new audience, and I think that was the goal. But they had to add maturity to it in a way that worked. But they did a lot of things verbally that's kind of crazy in today's world early on, where they just said, we'll just make the kids just say all types of things early on, which they did, which is fine. I think it added the level of like, you know what? I think kids do talk like that even today. We just don't know about it, most likely. So it's fine,
they swear. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that doesn't necessarily excuse it for the film, but I think when you're talking, there's certain parts where you have to go, I get it. The director, I don't think he was trying to be irreverent. I think he was trying to make it scary. And so you have that bit where Dracula calls a little girl. He says, give me the amulet, you bitch. Well, I don't think it was, hey, we get to say the word bitch. I don't think that was the intent. I think it was Dracula's a bad guy.
Oh.
And he's not going to care if she's a little girl or not. This was supposed to be the villainous Dracula.
Yeah, I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to the kids in school, what they're saying to each other.
Oh.
Yeah, like I'm referring to the crazy things that they're saying, which honestly, the words that they're using are crazy in today's world and probably not okay, by the way.
Certain words, yeah. There's at least one, definitely.
That are used multiple times. But I think the genuineness, the part about back then and knowing and like remembering things, the kids are being written to be kids, and when they speak and talk to each other, it doesn't sound like it's an adult trying to write a kid and write them as an adult. It's an adult doing a good job writing a kid with no barriers in what they're going to say, which is generally speaking, as I remember from being that age, there was a lot of, when there was no adults around, there was no insulation to things that were being said. It was whatever.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's nothing.
No, I remember going over to a friend's house, and the parents would go, all right, we're taking off, and they'd leave, and the kid would run into a room and come out with the Playboys he had hidden. So
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, you get to that point where you, as an artist, as a storyteller, you know they have to have the debate. How much reality do we allow? How much reality do we convey in this story? And that's where I think the line starts to get blurred for some people. Monster Squad perhaps does go too far in a few places. The photograph of the sister through the window, that's a bit much for a kid's movie. You know what I mean? And, the joke about she's not really a virgin. And it's like, there's a few things in there that I could see where parents would be raising the eyebrow. But I remember just the violence alone was an issue. And it's like, well, if you watched a war movie and men got shot or blew up from a landmine, you wouldn't blink an eye, right? And the idea behind this movie is if you faced monsters, they could kill you. That was the idea here. These were not Abbott. Well, even Abbott and Costello had some violence in it. So I was about to say Abbott and Costello, but a woman got thrown out a window by Frankenstein and that very violently. But these were villains. Wolfman, when he's in wolf form, at least, he was a villain. Dracula is pure evil. And I have to say, as a kid, I was a teenager again by this point, but I really appreciated the story and that there were consequences. And there was this idea of like a child had to deal with a mother and father that were clearly heading for a breakup, right? The police officer and his wife, the main character's parents were fighting constantly. And you could see this was going to be a divorced family. And that's scary to a child. And then you have a scary German guy, turns out, he was in a concentration camp. When the kids tell him like, hey, you know a lot about monsters. And he goes, now that you mention it, I guess I do. And the door closes and you see the numbers on his arm. It's like saying, hey man, if this is too much for you, have you looked around at life lately?
Yeah, I think that in general, that too, like the whole telling of kids, like maybe they're afraid of the wrong things sometimes, and maybe they need to have a more open mind about certain things too. I mean, in that case, they were afraid of the German guy for like forever, yet he wasn't scary at all.
No, he's one of the nicest characters.
Exactly. I think that's a huge part of storytelling and helping establish that for children. I do appreciate that they made a unique story arc for Frankenstein's monster versus being, generic or bland. And that gave some, don't always expect the most villainous to always be, it's not always, they're redeemable. So it gave some balancing acts to a lot of that. Obviously, there was more, I feel like there was always a lot more to that movie than we got to see. I feel like they didn't have the budget to do everything and tell the whole story. There's a lot of like, huzzah, we're here, or magic, we're here, or suddenly this is here and here. Like there's a lot of suspension of disbelief, but I think that film did a great job doing that because everything looked great. The characters were believable. You rooted for them, and there wasn't anything that wasn't fun to watch. That movie is a lightning rod when it comes to just go, 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 and it's never boring for any split second at all. So I like that a lot. Yeah,
I agree. I love that movie. The score is perfect. I guess the movie's not 100% perfect, but I don't care. It's my Goonies. It still is. So I gotta say something here, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but I feel like this is a good place to wrap up, actually.
Yeah,
I feel like we said it all, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's some maybe honorable mentions, but maybe we'll save them for a different time.
Sure. Well, there was lots of different movies. I mean, we could easily rattle off. There's, we could go more into Lost Boys. We could go into It. We could go into any of these other films. But I feel like we covered the core idea of what we wanted to convey. This idea that kids love facing their fears. And it's really a shame that today that seems to be not a popular concept in media, though Stranger Things is one of the most popular show with teenagers. So that's not an absolute.
Yeah, Stranger Things is definitely a good resurrection of that whole idea, more or less. So if people haven't watched Stranger Things, you should. If you're a big fan of these films, you should go back and watch it. And now you've got, what is it going to be, 5 seasons pretty soon of it to watch. And to say that the kids didn't get older over the course of 5 seasons from like 2018 or 2016, I don't remember. No, it was like 2016.
I haven't seen any of the newer seasons.
It's almost been 10 years for the whole series. Wow, I'm just thinking about it now. So yes, go watch that. It's fun.
Yeah. There's another movie. It's not as good. I'm going to warn that right up front. But it's not bad. It's a movie called Monster Summer. And it's got kids in danger facing monsters. So I recommend that one. It's Mel Gibson. He's very charming in it. And the reveal at the end's a little but the adventure getting there is pretty good. So that's a one I'll put as a side recommend.
I'll add one more to that list then too. I do think that the remake of It does a good job. Speaking of that, because it definitely has children. The newest remake of It, that was a lot of fun to watch with the kids running through that. I think that was the highlight of the movie, was the fact that it was actually
I
a bunch
like
of
part
kids.
one.
So,
I
yeah,
like
part
part
one.
one.
Yep, exactly. Part one. Yep.
All right then. Well, hey, this was good. Thanks for coming, Darren, as always.
It's been a blast, and it'll continue to be a blast into the future. You guys watch some of these films and add some recommendations down below. What do you want us to watch? What do you want us to review? Let us know.
Please, I'm going to say this again. I would like to hear some more interaction from you guys in the comments, just because we'd like to know, is there anything you think we could do better? Is there anything you think we should really do worse? Is there some films you want us to talk about? Is there a topic you want us to talk about? Please let us know. We'll always consider all of them. So thank you for even tuning in and checking out this podcast. We really enjoy making it, and we hope you enjoy listening to it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic evening, night, day, or future.
And I will go ditto. Good night.